Hello and welcome back to GameCyc Weekly. My name is Danny and this is the show where every week we talk about gaming news, reviews, thoughts, discussion, etc. And that is a massive lie because I didn't do this last week. And that is a mix of a totally planned holiday and then a totally unplanned change in some work stuff, which took up some extra time. And then I kind of just ran out of time to do it last week. And then I kind of wanted to rush it to try and just get something out that wasn't a million years late, and then I figured there's no point really rushing any of this. So yeah, so we're just going to pretend that last week was a totally planned break, and this week's episode will only be late by 2 days, so it's fine. So we're going to be starting off with a bit of a Unity update, since Unity has made some moves since I last discussed this or last talked about it. And then we're going to talk about a second bit of news, if you can believe that. And then we're going to talk about Lies of P, since that's the thing I played or wanted to play and kind of talk about. So we'll get into that very shortly. So, Unity update. This is a bit old at this point, but we're still going to talk about it. If for those that don't remember, they made some very bold moves in terms of how they wanted to monetize their game engine that a lot of people use, and I can't remember if I said it's the most widely used game engine, and I don't know if that's true, and if it isn't, I'm sorry, and if it is, that's wild. And they came out with a bunch of very poorly communicated messages, including they were sorry that we were confused, they were sorry that we were anxious about these things. At no point did they say something like, oh, this was an absolutely garbage idea, until it was way too late. So they did finally come out and say that it was a garbage idea. Or, they're not sorry that it's a garbage idea. They're sorry they got caught coming up and communicating a garbage idea. So they've kind of backtracked on a bunch of it. And before we get into the things where they've backtracked and what the new deal actually is, I think the most notable garbage thing that they said was people noticed that they had removed their terms of service from GitHub, and Unity's response was they removed it because hardly anyone was looking at it. As if that would ever hold up in a court of law. Oh, no one looked at it, so we removed it, Your Honor. So yeah, that was smooth. That was why, that was a good choice. So anyways, they've put out the usual apology letter and backtracked on the planned changes. They've increased the thresholds for the runtime fee, aka this is the whole price per install thing. And they made it so that this fee will only begin with the next LTS version of Unity. I don't know what LTS stands for, but I think it's the next proper version of Unity, which will be shipping in 2024. So any games already made and released and games currently being made won't be affected by the pricing changes. Anyone making a game in the current version of Unity and doesn't upgrade to the next version of Unity shouldn't be affected. I can imagine a lot of devs will have zero interest in updating to the next version of Unity, and they'll stick with their current one as long as they legally and physically and literally can. And there's a whole bunch of details. They increase how much revenue you have had to make in terms of lifetime, how much you make on a yearly basis. They increase the actual amount of it. But none of this really kind of matters. It's kind of immaterial at this point because the trust is broken. How many Unity, I can't imagine any Unity devs who rely on using Unity for their livelihood has now decided to sit back and relax and think, oh, thank God that's all over. Because I'm sure in the back of their minds they're just going to be thinking, Unity can just do this again at any point, and they have a history of kind of bad decision making. So I imagine that a lot of developers might at this point just be trying to do damage control and being like, let's try and ship the game that we've got, see how long they can last on their current version of Unity, and what's the feasibility of them moving to another engine. Anecdotally, I've seen other developers already, moving their stuff to other engines, people talking about Godot or Godot a lot, and talking about how great it is and what a magic silver bullet it is for all of game development, even though for some reason it's still not widely used, but whatever. I'm saying this as a game maker source guy, so I have people constantly telling me to move to Godot, and I'm just like, I am not learning another thing because I can still barely comprehend the game maker after a decade of using it. But anyways, yeah, I wonder how many are just going to stick it out on old Unity, how many are going to move engine, and what maybe only medium-sized businesses and above or large businesses and above will move on to going to the next version of Unity. I imagine they'll have to really make Unity 2024 some amazing bit of kit that makes all the developers forget about this complete awful moment in time and decide to like still upgrade and go with the risk of having all future installs mess about with. Oh, and they also got rid of the whole them telling you how many people installed your game aspect of the fee, so now it will all be self-reported. But again, it's like, this is such an awful way of going about things that it's just meaningless. It's immaterial how they go about it, and it was never going to be successful. It was never going to be accepted. If in a year's time it has completely changed and people are totally cool with this, then the industry really doesn't stand a chance. Speaking of the games industry not having a chance and potentially burning to the ground, I guess the biggest bit of news this past week has been that the games industry has been layoff city this past week. And it's kind of been layoff city, by which I mean it's been nothing but layoffs for people working in the game development industry. It seems to have been the case for a couple of months now, or for a lot of 2023. The most notable organization in this is Epic. So they have laid off in total just under 900 people, which is a massive amount considering most studios don't even have that many people. So for Epic to remove 900 people, which I think I saw it was like 16% of their workforce, that is still a hefty bunch of humans. And this has taken a form of people working on Fortnite, people working on Fall Guys and other areas of their business. And it seems to have affected every discipline and every department, judging by the posts I'm seeing on Twitter. And it's pretty awful. It's kind of like, every so often this happens where a studio will, let go of a bunch of people, or a smaller studio will close, and you'll see on the Twitter timeline just a lot of people being like, hello, I was affected by the layoffs, I've got this much experience, please let me know of any positions that are coming up. But this time it's just constant, like you forget, like 900 people, almost 900 people is a lot of people. And this coincided with Creative Assembly, or Sega rather, saying that they would be letting go of a number of people at Creative Assembly. I haven't found out the numbers for that one, but it's a lot of people because supposedly they had a game in development called Hyenas, and for whatever reason internally they decided to can it before they even released it, and so that's affected the whole studio. So Epic laid off a bunch of people, Creative Assembly laid off a bunch of people, and then like 2 days later Ubisoft laid off a bunch of people, but it was like 6 people specifically in their social media team or something, and they figured that they probably wouldn't get noticed, but people were still noticing. And then just in the past few days, Team 17 Publishing has announced that they're going to be laying off members of their QA department, but this is apparently also affecting the wider departments such as programming and marketing, and even their CEO is leaving amicably, in massive quotation marks, according to a Eurogamer article. And then, even more breaking, like this has just come out like minutes before I've recorded this, Naughty Dog, creators of The Last of Us, Uncharted, Crash Bandicoot, first party Sony studio, they are also going to be cutting short the contracts of a number of staff. Allegedly, this is 25 contractors, mostly in QA. This is according to Kotaku. And, Naughty Dog has, there's been rumors of them having trouble with a multiplayer game that they've been making, and its development's not been going the way they wanted. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is just a fallout from those troubles. But all of this is horrific for an industry that makes more money than pretty much every other media industry combined, that has C-level executives making obscene amounts of money. The fact that it is so normal for regular game dev workers to just be laid off at a moment's notice, it's insane. It is bananas. It is completely unacceptable. Games make way too much money and are way too ubiquitous for there to be to have such little job security. I mean, Naughty Dog, for crying out loud. First party Sony studio. Makers of best-selling, critically acclaimed games, and they're having to let go of people. And some people are theorizing, a lot of these companies may have just accelerated their hiring during the pandemic, and now after 2 years or 3 years of good times, now those headcounts are starting to cost them a lot more money than they expected. The news from Epic about how they had I believe it was the CEO had put out the statement saying that they had spent money in the wrong places, they had made some bad financial decisions, and they're like, we're still making money, but we're not making as much money as we would have hoped, or we're not making as much money as we need, and therefore, 900 people are going to go. And it's like, why? Why do the 900 people that probably didn't make these decisions have to go? Why can't some obscene salaries at the top be chopped down temporarily, at least, just to minimize the amount of damage here? It's really unfortunate. It really sucks. In some ways, the games industry is bloated. In some ways, it is completely inefficient. But again, I think it's people, not to sound like the local crazy guy on your street corner, but there's so much money at the top. You look at the salaries of CEOs at certain gaming giants, and it is just unbelievable. Hopefully, some kind of new balance could be struck. Hopefully, this won't carry on, and hopefully, games industry workers can, at some point in the future, secure more job security, because frankly, it really isn't sustainable at the moment, and it really sucks. So to move on from that really depressing news, let's move on to talking about a Souls-like game. Ha 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 ha. So Lies of P came out a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I forget now at this point. It is a Souls-like game. I got it on Game Pass, and it uses the mythology or the story of Pinocchio very loosely, from what I understand. And I decided to play it, and I played it up until and including the first boss. Now, I should probably mention that I do not play Souls-like. It is this whole genre of gaming that has completely passed me by because I never had access to Dark Souls or Demon's Souls. And frankly, it didn't really appeal to me because the primary thing that people were telling me about how great these games were was the difficulty. And I know, I'm not saying anything original here. Like plenty of people complained about how they are obtuse games with insane difficulty and like unrealistic expectations of the player. But then eventually everyone who makes these claims apparently goes on to like absolutely loving them, and you hit some point where you're like, oh, I understand the challenge now and I fully embrace this game. And I'm still waiting for that epiphany to hit me, because it sure as hell didn't hit me with Lies of P. So it's a Souls-like game developed by NeoWiz and Round 8 Studios, inspired by Pinocchio, and and before this game, the only real Souls-like experience I had was with Bloodborne, where I played a few hours on my PS4. And going into Lies of P, my initial thoughts were, okay, this looks good. Very impressive visuals. The sound is perfectly fine. It's very mysterious and obscure with whatever's going on. But it's interesting enough. You have a robot hand, you have a big sword, you're Pinocchio, you're a robot puppet thing, I guess, I don't know. And your primary antagonists that you have to fight off are a bunch of puppets, or some kind of weird clockwork men. It looks to be a fever dream version of like merry old England. And so originally this was just going to be me talking about the first, hour of Lies of P. And then I thought, you know what, let me actually put in some effort here and try and try and get a bit further with this. For the one person on Earth who doesn't know what a Souls-like is, and I know you're listening to this, a Souls-like is a game where it's very high difficulty, but also when you die, you get reset back to like the last checkpoint you had. And I know that doesn't sound incredibly different to how a lot of games will do checkpoints, but with Souls-like games, or at least with Lies of P, the checkpoints can be very sparse and very few and far between. Like, there'll be one at the start of a section, and then then there won't be another one until the start of the next section, and there could be an hour of gameplay between that, or half an hour of gameplay between that, and every time you die, all the enemies respawn again. So you have to fight through all the enemies you went through before, and as well as the one that killed you. So it's very challenging, and it can be very unforgiving. And with Lies of P, the first couple of enemies, I was like, all right, these aren't any issue. And then you get to your first kind of mini sub-boss thing, and you're like, okay, this guy's a bit more challenging, fair enough. His attacks do a bit more damage, and he moves faster than a snail, unlike the regular bosses. And then if you could get that boss down to 1% of health left, but they'll get a lucky hit on you, and then you have to respawn all the way back at the beginning of the area where the last checkpoint was, and it can be absolutely mind-bendingly controller-breaking frustrating. and I don't know if I have the patience for it. I sure as hell didn't have the patience for it with Lies of P. So I got all the way to the first boss. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe the boss will make me feel better, because frankly, the combat and the enemies before that, it's not actually that interesting. Like, it wasn't difficult. Like, yeah, I died a couple of times, but it was always because of, I don't know, what I would consider a cheap shot. It's because an enemy was placed behind a door or a wall, or they sneak up on you whilst you're dealing with another enemy. And at no point was I like, okay, was this my fault because I just didn't understand the enemy's patterns correctly, or I didn't understand their attacks correctly. No, it's because like they were hidden away and they snuck up on you. And then you just have to learn when they sneak up on you and then deal with it in your next run. So, which I don't find particularly satisfying as a gameplay loop, but whatever. But I think the other thing that wasn't helping was the fact that I just didn't find the combat satisfying. The default weapon or the default attack that you have, I honestly don't know because I bought one more weapon and it still didn't feel great. My problem was that it's slow, it's sluggish, it feels unresponsive. You have this great big sword as your primary weapon, and I don't know, it felt like there was like a delay every time I went to attack something. I would press the attack button, my guy swings his sword, but not quite in the timing that I'm expecting. And timing in a Souls-like is very important, and it's very important in the Lies of P. So I felt like I never got the timing of the attacks down correctly. I felt like I never got the timing of parries down correctly. Felt like I never got dodging down correctly. And of course the game won't really give you kind of any kind of ramp up to this. It just throws you to the wolves and then keeps score. And they also love all their lore. They love all their flavor text in Lies of P, where they'll go through about 3 paragraphs of flowery dialogue, but not tell you that the object you're looking at is actually to increase your health or to increase your fable. I forget what it's already. I already forget what it was because I'm clearing my memory of this game to make way for other things that are fun. And yeah, so you barely know what the object you pick up are. You don't know if something you pick up is important or not, or how it affects you. There's about 17 different attributes that your character has, with no explanation really of what any of them do besides the really obvious one. And yeah, so at no point did I find any of the combat fun. Some of it was challenging. Sometimes I'd be like having to deal with like 3 enemies at once, and then if you can get through that quite successfully, then there can be some satisfaction in that. But when I got to the first boss, so it's like, I don't know, the circus lion tamer fellow, whatever he is, I attempted him several times, and I got his health down to maybe 50%, 40%, and it was a struggle. And I was trying my absolute best to complete at least this first boss, because I didn't want to be completely pathetic. But then after, I don't know, my 10th try or something, all I could think was, if I beat this guy, what am I rewarded with? Okay, you get to carry on playing the game and deal with more of this combat and more of these bosses. And I immediately stopped playing because I was just like, I'm not having fun. This isn't fun. I'm not enticed by the story. Like, it's trying to be obtuse and oblique with what's going on, but it just comes off as pretentious, especially using Pinocchio. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, Jiminy Cricket and the Blue Fairy or whatever, and you're Pinocchio and Geppetto is your creator. It's like, all right, cool, that's a free idea you got to use. Well done. And I'm sorry if the story becomes incredible after the first boss, but it doesn't do a great job of it before the first boss. So frankly, it's lost me. So yeah, I guess that's my very ignorant hate speech on Lies of P. It didn't grab me. It didn't entice me. I didn't think the gameplay was fun. It looks good. It looks good, and it looked pretty unique. In terms of the pure visuals, I mean, the UI. Like I said, I've barely ever played a Souls-like game, and even I was looking at the UI thinking, yeah, this looks like it's ripped off from a Souls-like game. So no, it hasn't enticed me. Now, all of that being said, I think it's almost inspired me to go back to play Bloodborne, because Bloodborne's the only Souls game I have, and as mentioned, I had played it shortly, and I'd attempted starting Bloodborne like 2 or 3 times, and I think on the 3rd try, I was starting to get interested in it, because I was starting to realise, oh, okay, this is how the combat works, and this is how the levels are being structured out to try and, to get you engaged. So I think there's a chance I might try Bloodborne again. The only problem being is it's on my PS4, which is hidden away somewhere, and I absolutely, and I remember at the time the loading times were awful, and I remember not enjoying waiting for everything to load back in the day. And now that I'm used to having a console that's got an SSD drive in it, I'm really not sure if I can handle going back to a non SSD console. Yeah, I know, first world problems. So I might go back to that. So if nothing else, Lies of P might finally get me to play Bloodborne and enjoy it. Look, after stopped playing Lies of P, I loaded up Solar Ash because I saw that was another game that's been added to Game Pass recently. And boy, was that a breath of fresh air. I was like, wow, I know what's going on. I know how to control my character. I know what my objective is. And the combat is free flowing and smooth and responsive. So yeah, and I was like, I'm definitely not going back to Lies of P at any point after this. So yeah, so that's it for this week. I know it's late, and I'm sure you waited 2 weeks just to hear me shit all over a game that you possibly like. But hey, it's the nature of the beast with gaming. So yeah, that's this week's episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you've stuck around to the end, please subscribe, like, leave a review, all that good stuff. And hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye.